In 1995, a man robbed two banks in broad daylight with lemon juice smeared on his face. He believed it made him invisible to security cameras. He'd read that lemon juice works as invisible ink and somehow reasoned that if it hides writing from a light source, it would hide his face from one too. He was arrested within hours. He wasn't lying. He couldn't understand how the cameras had seen him. This case became one of the most cited stories in psychology, not because of the lemon juice, because of what it revealed about how confidence actually works. Smart people, we tell ourselves, think more clearly. They spot bad logic faster. They're harder to fool. Being smart is supposed to mean being right more often. But here's the thing. That's not quite what the research shows. And what it actually shows is stranger and a little more uncomfortable. In 1999, psychologists David Dunning and Dunning-Kruger at Cornell University ran a study inspired directly by that bank robbery case. They tested people on logic, grammar, and humor, then asked each person to rate their own performance. The people who scored the lowest consistently rated themselves as above average. Not slightly above, dramatically above. Everyone knows this part of the story by now. It got turned into a meme, a shorthand for dumb people don't know they're dumb. But that reading misses the actual finding, and the actual finding is more important. Dunning and Kruger weren't just measuring stupidity, they were measuring something called metacognition, your ability to accurately judge your own thinking. And their real conclusion was this: the skills required to be good at something are often the exact same skills required to recognize that you're bad at it. If you don't have the skill, you don't have the tool to notice its absence. That's unsettling on its own. But it's not the twist. The twist came later, and it involves people who are undeniably intelligent. In 2013, a legal scholar named Kahan ran an experiment that should have confirmed the comfortable version of this story, that smarter people reason their way to better conclusions. Instead, it did the opposite. Kahan gave thousands of participants a math problem, a pure numbers question, no politics involved. People who scored higher on numeracy tests solved it more accurately, exactly what you'd expect. Then he gave a second group the identical math problem, same numbers, same logic, but wrapped in a politically charged context, framed as a study about gun control. For people with low numeracy skills, the political framing didn't change much. They got it wrong at roughly the same rate either way. For people with high numeracy skills, something strange happened. When the correct answer lined up with their political beliefs, they solved it easily. When the correct answer contradicted their political beliefs, their accuracy collapsed. And it didn't just collapse. The smartest, most numerically skilled participants in the entire study were the most polarized of anyone. Their math ability wasn't protecting them from bias. It was amplifying it. Kahan called it motivated numeracy. The same brain power that lets someone solve a hard equation also let them find a reason the equation didn't apply, the moment the answer threatened something they cared about. So think about what that actually means. Intelligence didn't function like a truth detector here. It functioned like a lawyer, not a scientist trying to find the correct answer, a lawyer trying to win an argument they'd already decided to win. Keith Stanovich, a psychologist who spent years studying the gap between intelligence and rational thinking, calls it my-side bias, and his research found something that should reshape how you think about smart people entirely. IQ barely predicts your resistance to it. You can have an extremely high IQ and be just as vulnerable to defending your own side as someone with an average one. In some of his studies, more cognitive horsepower didn't reduce the bias, it just gave people more sophisticated ways to justify it. And it's not only political beliefs where this shows up. In 2017, researchers at Duke University studied something closer to home for a lot of highly educated people: financial decision-making. They found that professional investors, people with advanced degrees, years of training, genuine expertise, still fell for a pattern called overconfidence-driven trading. The more confident an investor was in their own analysis, the more they traded, and the more they traded, the worse their returns got. Confidence and skill had come apart entirely. In fact, some of the most consistently unprofitable traders in the dataset were also the ones who rated their own predictions as most reliable. Their intelligence hadn't stopped them from being wrong. It had convinced them they couldn't be. Here's where it gets deeper. Two cognitive scientists, Hugo Mercier and Dan Sperber, proposed an explanation in 2011 that reframes the entire question. What if reasoning never evolved to find truth in the first place? What if it evolved to win arguments? Think about the environment your ancestors actually lived in. Survival wasn't a solo math problem. It was a social one. Being right mattered less, most of the time, than being persuasive, than defending your standing in the group, than not losing face in front of people whose cooperation you needed to stay alive. A brain that's extremely good at constructing convincing justifications would have been more useful, most days, than a brain that's coldly accurate but socially defenseless. If that theory is even partly right, then what looks like a flaw in human reasoning isn't a flaw at all. It's the feature working exactly as designed. Intelligence, in this view, isn't a tool for discovering what's true. It's a tool for defending what you already need to believe. And the smarter you are, the better you are at that particular job. Which brings us back to the man with lemon juice on his face. It's tempting to laugh at him and feel safely distant from that kind of mistake. But Kahan's numeracy study is the harder pill, and so is the trading data from Duke. The failure wasn't limited to someone with an obviously bad theory. It showed up strongest in people who were unusually good at math, unusually well-trained in finance, in exactly the moments their reasoning mattered most. None of this means intelligence is worthless or that thinking carefully doesn't matter. The same research shows something else too. The people who did best at resisting my-side bias weren't necessarily the smartest in the room. They were the ones who had specifically practiced a different skill, actively looking for reasons they might be wrong, rather than reasons they were right. Stanovich has a term for this too. He calls it actively open-minded thinking, and unlike raw IQ, it can actually be built deliberately, the same way you'd build a habit. There's something almost humbling in that distinction. It suggests intelligence and wisdom were never the same trait wearing two names. One measures how fast you can build an argument. The other measures whether you're willing to tear your own argument down first before someone else has to do it for you. Most of us assume we already do the second thing, simply because we're capable of the first. The data says otherwise. So the next time you catch yourself constructing an airtight, articulate argument for something you already deeply wanted to believe before you ever picked up the evidence, it's worth pausing on that feeling. It might not be your intelligence failing you. It might be your intelligence doing exactly the job it was built to do, a few 100,000 years before anyone needed it to find the truth, instead of just winning the argument.